Okay, we're live. All right, well, welcome everyone. I'm going to give everyone about just under a minute to get logged in here before we start presenting. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to run through a few logistics about this webcast. First of all, you're here joining us live for enabling a remote workforce with intelligent automation. And our speaker is Vince DiMascio. So thank you for joining us today, Vince. A few logistics, there are attachments on this webcast, which is being recorded. The attachments have a PDF version of the presentation that Vince is giving, a case study of the work that Synaptiq and BAL did together, and there is a link to a web form for project ideas. So if you're inspired while you're watching this webcast and you want to schedule time with our chief data scientist, feel free to fill that out and we'll get that scheduled for you. So without further ado, just a quick introduction. I'm Portia Roberts. I'm head of marketing for Synaptiq, which is a full stack artificial intelligence consulting firm. We are hosting this webcast as part of our thought leadership series this year. And joining us today, as I said, is our client, Vince DiMascio with BAL. I'll introduce him a little bit more detail in a moment. So if we want to start presenting, we can get on with the webcast. Awesome. So a little more about Vince and, well, okay. Backing up for a second, we've got an agenda. We are going to go through this presentation probably in about 30 minutes. Following the introduction, Vince is going to cover a basic understanding of intelligent automation and some of the techniques that he employed at BAL. He's going to review some of the business challenges that they covered and their real-world applications. A new business challenge that came up recently, obviously, is COVID-19 and the resulting quarantine that most of us have been dealing with. So Vince is going to talk more about how the work he was doing with intelligent automation helped him to enable a remote workforce. And finally, he'll conclude with some tips on how to problem solve in a business scenario using intelligent automation. And then at the end, we'll leave time for questions and answers. So if you do have questions, feel free to pop them into the little chat screen there, and we'll definitely address them at the end. So a little more about Vince. He's CIO and CTO of Appleman Leiden. He has a team of technologists whose job it is to reimagine the global mobility and deliver new ways of providing global immigration services. Vince has over 25 years experience in transformational change, agile software, AI, intelligent automation, a variety of other emerging technologies. But he's more than a technologist. DiMascio understands business and applies technology to deliver significant value, and I think you'll see that in this presentation. He has over 10 years of consulting experience with PwC and 2 master's degrees from New York University and Columbia University. I think it's also worth pointing out, very exciting, BAL was named one of the CIO 100 for the intelligent automation work that we did together. So that's really wonderful. There's some pretty incredible companies up there. And I think the nomination speaks to this very innovative work that Vince and his team did with Synaptiq. So I'm very much looking forward to this presentation. Vince is going to talk through everything that we did together and give some really practical examples. And I think there's a lot to be learned, not just for other law firms potentially, but a lot of other industries out there could apply this methodology that Vince has worked out with us. So without further ado, Vince.
Thank you, Portia. Appreciate it. Happy to be here to share what I hope is some useful information today. I'd like to start with our pre-pandemic strategy so you can see kind of how what we've been doing sort of gave us an edge. We've been on a transformation and optimization journey in recent years that's involved work that proved useful in dealing with the disruption that came from this pandemic. We're continuously modernizing security. We've got broad scale digitization. We're deploying virtual agents, and this project, which supports or is related to all these other initiatives. The project is classifying documents and requests as they arrive. So we're controlling for the loss of fidelity that comes with converting paper to information as part of that process. With our technology strategy, we've decided to focus on the few things that matter most for our clients and thus for our growth. And for us, that's the quality of our legal work, our client experience, and our operations. In order to deliver the real value, we had to organize in a way that allowed for us to build these new capabilities on our own teams while at the same time delivering results. And we set out to do it in the first quarter of the program. So it was a pretty ambitious project. The work contributes to being ready for staying in operations during and getting leaner and meaner as we return from this pandemic. We're seeing that with the right operating model and digital tool set, we can work effectively in a distributed model, even in paper-heavy businesses. And I'll note that it's important to control the volatility of changes in your strategy, because whipsawing your teams in that way, even in light of a really disruptive force like this, can cause mass confusion and make people not understand exactly what the direction and priorities are. So for us, we narrowed our strategy in some way, but didn't change it, so people could still operate autonomously and move things forward in these initiatives. So with that, we were focusing immediately on the core business, using automation to deploy secure remote workforce so we could see that people are safe and have the right tools, make sure our capabilities and initiatives are running efficiently, and that any that can be shifted do shift, but not at the expense of investments in these major levers of ML and innovation around automation. And then we looked at new ways to invest, to offer new services and products, and otherwise continue enhancing our client service as demand increased for legal services and legal advice during this pandemic. So I'm going to cover 2 use cases today from our automation portfolio, but before I do, I want to just baseline on terms. So there's RPA and there's intelligent automation. When I say intelligent automation, I mean combining machine learning with RPA and other automation tools to do more than what we could otherwise do with just RPA alone. Gardner calls this hyper automation. So it's enhancing RPA to give it kind of a smarter skill set. We're looking at 2 different types of machine learning. There's supervised and unsupervised. In supervised learning, you give a system things and labels, like in this example, emails that are labeled as being spam or not, or being important or not. And then we ask the system, given a thing, to predict what that label is with some confidence. In unsupervised learning, we give a bunch of things to a system and ask that system to do stuff like group those things by similar traits. For the projects today that we're talking about, it's all supervised learning. So just to narrow everyone's focus there, we're building and improving machine learning models that predict labels for images, text, and combinations of images and text in the context of handling documents for our firm. And this is a picture of a general pattern and one that we use for the machine learning lifecycle. The 6 phases shown here are what we do to get a model up and running and continuing to run. So we collect data, label it, you train your model, you test the model and iterate plus evaluate it, and then deploy it. Once it's deployed, you set a mechanism in place for continuous monitoring and improvement while it's in production, because you might get new types of documents, the forms may change, and you might get things that you just want to correct for generally that you haven't seen yet. So enough background. Let's talk about the business challenges we're facing and seeking to solve here. So we have 2 related challenges that seem to be generally useful across industries, not limited to legal or even more specifically to immigration work. There's a growing marketplace of products and services in this space, and the reason is there's a lot of demand for it, and it's a hard problem to solve. It sounds like it's easy to solve, and it's pretty unsexy. So the 2 projects they're related. One is a generalized capability for just handling documents. We're paper heavy, so a service that can convert an image of a document into real information is very useful to us. It may sound like fancy OCR, but if you've tried the systems on the market, you'll know the quality can be pretty bad. And there's also a disappointing need for sustained human involvement as you continue to use the system. The other case is a system. Yeah, go ahead.
You said sexy OCR. Can you just like describe what that acronym is?
Unsexy. Oh, sorry. Yeah, OCR is optical character recognition. For those who don't know, you can scan a picture of a document and an OCR system will recognize the characters that constitute the words and paragraphs and so on, and return back text that you can use instead of it just being an image. So I'll get deep into that here in a few slides. Sorry for the jargon. So the other case here is related. It's to classify text that's been extracted from specific printed documents that we receive in the mail. The documents are requests for information and materials. So many businesses deal with these types of documents, like a subpoena is a request for materials, or if you work in insurance, you might get a request for materials to substantiate your claim, that kind of thing. So it's reading that request. So in this case, the robot would read the letters and tell us what the sender is asking for. So on the generalized kind of document handler, what we're looking for is shorten turnaround time, get us more and better data about the documents we're handling, enhance quality and security, and boost employee engagement, all accessible in a distributed way. So you don't need to touch the paper. And here's what it looks like. So you'll see two general phases that are very similar in form. The first phase is classify, where we identify what the document is. The next one is extract, where we get the relevant information from the document based on what it is. So the extract is in many ways dependent on the classification. And for both, we have a threshold beneath which human review is triggered. So if it has a low confidence that it classified it right or that it extracted it right, it'll tell us, and we know we'll set it aside for human confirmation or correction. So I put a PDF of a visa application as an example. The system will read that text, look at the image, and say, this looks like a visa application, and the contents of it that I've read using this OCR give me pretty good confidence. I think it's a visa application, and I'm 98% sure of that. So if our threshold is 98% or lower, it moves forward to extract the information set, the specific information that we want from the document, like the application number, the date, the person's name, and so on, and give us all that data back so we can store it and otherwise use it in downstream processing, taking away all the touching that a human would otherwise have to do. If either the classification or the extraction result falls under that threshold, it gets pushed into a queue for human review, and that's the kind of green box there. Then the feedback from the human during that review cycle is incorporated into a retraining process, which means that the systems gets better over time. So again, doesn't sound like bleeding edge 21st century technology at first glance. You may be watching this talk while your car drives you around and wondering what's so hard about reading paper, but it's surprisingly challenging to accomplish at a high level of quality even today. And there's a big and growing market around this problem that provides several options, and I've listed 4 options here. I think there are more. But these are 4 that we kind of looked at when we were trying to solve here. There's RPA native, so if you use an RPA platform, it may have its own or may ship with third-party products that do kind of OCR, and you can work workflows around that. There's the second option, which is what we did, which is to combine RPA with a machine learning model you build and maintain yourself. You can buy a generalized kind of products for handling documents and plug those into your RPA platform, and I have a couple listed here. Or you can use cloud providers that offer document understanding services. Amazon has them, so do Azure and Google. We chose to do our own here because we weren't building from whole cloth. It's not like software necessarily, so we don't have the same risks of maintenance costs and risks of obsolescence and all that. Instead, we're using established tools that can do this work well if they have the right training and data. So, I mean, your mileage may vary depending on what you're after, but we weren't able to get the same quality from a general purpose tool as we can from a tool that's laser focused and continuously retrained on our verticals data set, on our firm's data set. We're not trying to cover a large set of documents like Google is. We don't need to worry about mortgage applications and everything else. We just want really, really high quality on those specific documents that we see every day. So for us, it made sense to train models in-house with a partner. Back to the OCR, Portia. This is part of why it's so challenging and where the intelligence comes into play. The highlighted areas are where we use AI. And by AI here, I mean machine learning, computer vision, language models, and so on, as you can see here. So as an example, having the correct spelling is important if you're planning to use like a numeric representation for your text, like for the technical people here, like a word to vec or doc to vec. OCR can be bad at distinguishing, for example, a lowercase o from a lowercase a. And you might end up with sentences that spell check, but that don't make sense. So you can even use other kind of comparison methods that will get you good matching, but you'll lose the meaning of the words in the paragraphs and so on, which you may need later. So we use intelligence here to adjust, filter, and improve this capture, and that gives us improved quality just on the OCR generally, but importantly, it also unlocks more powerful machine learning capability for downstream work, which is another benefit we get from not using a general tool like a cloud offering. And here's what it looks like. This is how we take the images and text separately and put them together through their own particular machine learning models to get a combined classification that's pretty high score. So what we're doing here is, if we get, like, as an example, if an approval notice could come and it's a government form for the US government, if they send us an approval notice, it might look a lot like a receipt notice, except for a few words. So the picture of it, if you were to kind of unfocus your eyes while you're looking at the two, you wouldn't really be able to tell the difference as they're laid out on the page. But if you read the text, you'll see that one says approval and one says receipt, and there's other language in there that sets them apart to a human, and so it's easier to distinguish. So what we're doing here is using a convolutional neural network, which is what's great for classifying image data, big matrices of colors and on a grid, versus text data, and then combining those so they each get a vote in the ultimate classification when a new document comes in. So the left-hand side of this is how we trained. The middle is the green document coming in is while it's in use. You'll see a new document come in. It hits both of those models. They both get a vote. It's weighted, and then the classification comes out, and then we apply that smart OCR, which we just talked about on the prior slide, to pull the data that we really want, the information that we really want from the document, not just all the text to have to parse later. The second use case is similar in the approach, so I won't repeat the detail here for the OCR and the various models that we're using. But the important difference here is that this one solves for a different problem, which has to do with what's in the document. We receive these letters in the mail asking us to provide information. Again, it's like for those in legal, it's like a subpoena. For those in insurance, it's like asking for more evidence about a claim. And then the system reads that letter and can tell you from what it's read what's being requested. So this is what this flowchart looks like. Again, we use intelligent OCR as described in another slide. Once we parse the document into paragraphs that constitute the document, we can then ask the system to predict on a section by section basis what the paragraph is asking for. And then once we know what the system thinks the letter's asking for, we can generate a document to help guide the response. So that could be a checklist of materials to collect. It could be drafting a response to a subpoena or whatever else you might need to generate in your business when you encounter this type of a scenario. So it's collect, classify, and then construct something to handle that part of the processing as a second set of eyes on the document, quality measure to make sure that nothing slips past, and something that helps to speed the turnaround time. So we started this initiative before March, and we've been working on it for a while. But these are specific examples of the general concepts that apply with regard to remote work, right? As we continue to run while we're sheltered in place, as we return to work with distancing or even without distancing, as we think about what we learned about our ability to operate in a distributed way and gain the advantages attendant to allowing for distributed work, we can see that the automation here can pervade our business even all the way down at the level of hands-on paper handling. So we think about low or zero touch operations. We think about securing systems, shifting work to machines so people can focus on strategic thinking and helping clients as they struggle figuring out some of the challenges that are arising out of this. All in places that where they're not tethered to a desk or needing to be co-located with the paper and so on. A couple relevant quotes. The Gartner one's a lot more recent than the HBR one. I think the HBR one is from 2010 or 2011. There are links to the articles on here, so if you download the presentation, it's worth reading. They help support the notion that this is a good time to use technology and AI rather than a hatchet to get your organization leaner and meaner. Many businesses, if not most, that are running right now are investing in automation and AI because the value is even more obvious in light of our current and future needs to be nimble. So highly recommend reading these. And then I'm going to close here with a few tips from my experience here working these projects. The first one is to set yourself up to win. Choose something with non-trivial business value, but something that's not unwieldy. This early momentum is really helpful. And if you choose something that's too big and everyone knows it's important, but you can't get there, it's just not going to work. And if you choose something that's too small and ends up as a POC, it's not really viewed as having great value. So it's important to select carefully there and get specific about the problem so people know and will back the solution. Watch out for general purpose solutions that are looking for problems here. Going back to the kind of out of the box document handling capabilities, we saw a lot of that where it just couldn't work for even the narrow class of documents that we have going in our firm, and partner up well, of course. If you're like us, you can use support from experienced teams who can execute and who, as important as executing, can transfer the knowledge to you and your team so you can carry these programs forward. Tip 2 is fail fast. Pretty common. People get that. Get started, move quickly early. You'll probably find in many, if not most of your initial ideas that the data you're counting on isn't what you thought it would be or where you thought it would be. You're going to have to pivot because of that. And the sooner you do that, the better, because you can get stalled here and it's painful. And then last and most importantly, and the Synaptiq people will open and close their engagements with you with these remarks that the more data you have, and for supervised machine learning, certainly, the more labeled data you have, the better. If you have too little data, your models just may not work and your momentum may run out then along with your funding. If you don't have labeled data, we didn't have labeled data for a lot of this, your partner can help you find ways to handle that problem, to label it efficiently, even to leverage automation to help label, which gets kind of meta. But those are the 3 tips, and they're really important. So if you're going to pursue one of these for the first time, I hope they're helpful. They're pretty important guidance from my perspective, having been through this. So that's the end. We've got time here for some questions. I hope it was helpful. As always, reach out on LinkedIn. I'm going to switch back to video here, Portia.
Awesome. Well, thank you for presenting that. I think what's really great about this this talk and the work that you've done to put this together is it makes sense in sort of a procedural way of work that is hard to conceive of, right? Even for technical folks that spend a lot of time in the space that you are in, like thinking about how to use some of these emerging technologies in a way that really solves business problems requires being able to map it out, which is really helpful. I know I have some questions for you, so I'm going to start. I'm going to start asking them and encourage the audience to put their questions in to the channel as well as they come up. One question that came up as I was listening to you go through this is, and there's a lot of hype about this, right? Like, is technology going to take over jobs? So is the intelligent automation that you're putting in place replacing legal staff?
No, this is this is a common concern. You see and read about it on articles around automation. These bots don't do legal work. So that's like saying a word macro is doing legal work. It's so on that basis, no, not at all. They are augmenting our staff to, again, drive quality, drive turnaround time, get more insight, drive employee engagement. So for us, automation is all about the client experience, whether we're in an office or working from home. And these are, we like to say, it gives our lawyers superpowers because they can get through things more quickly, just like, again, OCR, word macros, and older technologies in the past.
One of the things that when we were talking about this presentation, we talked about a little bit was I think I read this in a Deloitte publication or something, was referring to lawyers and healthcare workers and other workers like that as knowledge workers, people who are experts at, in their domain, right? And one of the ways I hear what you're describing is that you're giving time for those knowledge experts to focus on the hard problems and deliver better client service, rather than having them perform rote activities that require the knowledge, but where the knowledge can easily be transferred to these algorithms, these learning algorithms that you're creating, so that there's fewer exceptions over time, basically. And then the knowledge workers are really doing client work and solving those like more challenging cases that required being a lawyer, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's creating capacity and otherwise shifting that work so that the lawyers can do the work that our clients want them doing.
Yep. So another question that came up was around security enhancements. I think you sort of maybe touched on that, but you didn't really go into it so much. How does a document handler, if anything, enhance security, or does it?
Yeah, it does. So a couple of ways. From a physical security point of view, it keeps documents in a central place where people can access them, but they're not easily shareable outside of our walls. So that limits potential egress points. And then the bot and the automation itself gives us the ability to read a document when it gets uploaded into our system so we can check it. So for example, if a client tries to upload the wrong passport to their project in our system can read it and say, wait a second, you're uploading John's passport and you're Mary, what's going on? And then they can, get the alert and adjust accordingly. So it's at varying levels, but definitely supports security in a lot of different ways.
And that's something that you had begun deploying before this whole lockdown and pandemic. But how are you able to leverage that now with, lawyers and different folks working from home?
So the systems that we have are kind of built into our workflow in many ways. So we have a proprietary case management system, and it connects to these machine learning models so that we can take advantage of them. And then separately, we have other applications that are specific to particular areas of work where we can connect to this same system. So we deployed it in a RESTful architecture. For those familiar with that, it's sort of like an Amazon service where you can post anything to it and it'll come back with an expected result. That makes it widely available for use, and it gives us better and better training data over time, because the more of each type of document we see, the smarter our systems get.
Interesting. Makes sense. So given that, another question that's sort of related is how do your people and systems actually interact with these bots, as you call them?
Yeah, so I can flip back to the presentation and show you. Actually, I've got some appendix slides. See if I can figure out how to do that. And I can show you what it looks like. So we've got 3 services as part of this. The first one, which is what you're seeing here, is the classifier. So what I posted some image of a document to this endpoint, and you can see what the post looks like for the technical people in the room here. And it looks, it classifies based on the probability score, takes the best one and says, here's what this document is. So we can hit this from any of our systems. We can put front ends in front of it to make people, I can just upload a document and it'll come back and tell me what it is. Or more often what we see is we integrate it into existing applications that we have. Another example of this is to extract the data. Once I know this is a driver's license, I post it to the extraction. So this comes back with, this is a driver's license, and tell me what data I want back from a driver's license. And the system knows I want the license number, the expiration date, the last name, first name, and so on. So it sends that back to us, and that's the extract. So they're 2 different capabilities because we may just want to classify. We may not always want to extract. So there's that separation. And again, like further to the slide from earlier, knowing what the document is supports our ability to extract better. And then this is a disjoining classifier. I didn't talk much about this one, but this is a common problem in businesses where you'll receive a single PDF that contains a bunch of material, and you have to parse it and cut out the documents that constitute the single PDF. So what this does is it uses that classifier to find the breakpoints in a large PDF, so we know where to split the document into separate PDFs that are all bundled into one. So we use that pretty frequently when people upload, and just in the day-to-day handling of documents. So it's a generalized kind of cloud-based capability that is accessible to a variety of different systems, and that's how we use it from the system point of view. And then from the sort of user point of view, they're working in the systems themselves, and in many cases don't even know. They don't know there's a smart system behind that. They just think it's really cool.
Mm-hmm. So you put this stack together, this technology stack together, and I did want you to speak a little bit to the products and software you're using, but we got a question that I'm going to ask that's sort of related to that. So maybe you can address that when you're answering this question. So the question is, which RPA software are more AI ML capable than others? And a second part to that question is, or is it the case that RPA platforms are more geared toward automation, and then there is a bolt-on AI ML software that enables the overall intelligent automation project? So could you speak to that and maybe talk a little bit about some of the technologies that you've used and why?
Sure. Yeah. So we use UiPath. There's a set of big players in the RPA space, and from my perspective, there's feature parity there. They're very similar products, and they're in a constant race to keep up with what's available. RPA, though, is the glue, and it does the more rote type of activities. It's if-then logic, and from what I've seen, the big 3 anyway are dropping in their own ML capabilities, while at the same time partnering with outside groups to do the same, because it's just so new. And I think I don't think there's a general, I wouldn't say UiPath is beating AA or Blue Prism in their ability to deploy AI, because I do think it's Lego pieces, and you may do very well with an AWS AI component, or you may need to build your own, just depending on what you're working on. For this was something that was so hyper specific for us, and the quality we needed was threshold was really high. And so nothing in that group worked for us in those 4 I listed before. The stack we're using is UiPath for RPA. We use Tesseract for OCR. It's all Python written. The machine learning is in scikit-learn in Python. And the APIs that I just showed are they're Flask APIs, again, Python. So pretty basic, pretty cut and dried, and easy to be kind of reconstituted using infrastructure automation, which was important to us to be able to spin these up and keep them updated and so on.
And again, I mean, I think one of the things that is interesting and important is that you, in order to get the precision that you needed and the quality of output, this was something that you had to build.
That's right.
Which leads me to ask the question, given your background and the team that you're working with, why work with Synaptiq for this project?
Yeah, we were referred to Synaptiq by a variety of clients. Went through a pretty rigorous RFP, as we always do, and they were in the short list. And then talking with them about our problem, they understood in much greater detail and were able to read back to us what the problem is, various approaches, what questions they had that were really resonating with us, having been down this road a variety of times with different approaches. And then we did a proof of concept that was lightweight, that worked. So that was a big part of it. I mean, we're pretty standard with the RFP program, so it wasn't anything magical there. But the capabilities of the team, from certainly the core machine learning, data science capabilities, were phenomenal. And then when we needed support, well, how do we stand this up on Flask, right? We use a lot of Microsoft.NET, C# here, and don't have a lot of people building Python-based systems. So we needed to have that built so it works, can be deployed easily with an operations team where this is new to, and integrated into the business. So that's all new capability and technical understanding that we needed to bring into our business and then carry forward.
Initial heavy lift with very domain-specific requirements is really kind of the short answer, right?
Yeah. I mean, to be in our vertical, to be in the immigration document set is pretty narrow as compared to what these other general capabilities can do. And if you're facing a situation like that, you'll probably find, like we did, that it's worth building.
So given your background, I think it's fair to ask you this question. What could, your counterpart in telecom or healthcare or supply chain logistics or insurance or any, number of industries that are dealing with a lot of paper documents, maybe in different stages of their, services and deliverables of workflows, what would you tell them they could learn from this work that you've done?
I mean, to go back into this deck, download the deck and see where we landed. If you're going to combine both the visual arrangement of items on a page, that vision of the document, plus the content, here's how you do it. This works. The architecture, the endpoints, the way it's laid out technically, there's a lot of technical solutions that are here in this presentation that I think you could get a leg up if you just borrow or tweak to suit your needs a little bit. And the business value for handling documents and bringing information out of those documents that we know it's trapped in there. Whatever the documents that you see every day are and contain is trapped unless you have someone sitting there keying that in. And that's just an expense that a lot of businesses aren't willing to pay. So you find workarounds, you abandon the data, you lose the opportunity to run analytics on that data because the cost of keying it in is so high. If you can get an automated workforce to accelerate that and get the quality you need, you can start to deliver and do the transformational activities of raising the top line with new services, new products, giving your clients experiences that no other firm can offer, because you've got that data advantage and that speed advantage.
And could you expand a little bit on the analytics piece? I mean, where does that come in? there was a question about it, but it wasn't clear what the questioner had wanted to get out of that. So I wanted to maybe just get you to talk a little bit more about analytics in case that's where they were getting at.
Yeah, so if you're looking to identify patterns in requests that you're getting, like let's say you're an insurance company and you're getting requests for claims, or let's say you're working with an insurance company, like you're a customer, and you get a request for more information often when you submit certain claims. Then you want to know what are the insurance companies as across industries, or in my industry, or with regard to certain products, what are they asking for? And how can I predict what's going to be asked when I have this sort of a request, so I can make sure it's there, or so I can provide extra supporting material there, or respond appropriately and quickly without having to go through okay, someone's got to read that, someone's got to identify what it is, and then find the playbook for how to respond. You can bring all that together, which is not an if-then, right? Because the narratives are different. You can't just say if this text is that text. It's a similarity score, and it's also replete with different objects like people's names and companies' names and product names and that kind of a thing. So you need machine learning there to help do that kind of a comparison. And then the analytics I'm talking about that's a value beyond being able to do this and do this better over time is unlocking data that you're not already keying in, because it's not required for the work you do, and therefore may have been cut out of the processing.
Right.
Like, you don't need to re-enter this date because we don't need it. But then you find out later, if I had that date, I really could start to predict something or describe something. And that's where the analytics opportunities open up, and you can provide new services and better insights.
Interesting. Well, there's another interesting question here that I want to get to. It said in some of your documents, facial recognition presents another opportunity for collecting and arranging data. Is that something you've thought about?
We're not dealing with facial recognition right now, other than on sort of pilots and just, is this interesting as a concept? So no, I don't have any experience there to really share that's valuable.
You're using machine vision, but you're using it to recognize documents, not faces.
Right.
Yeah, and there, I mean, I'm not sure who asked that question, but we do have another webcast that we did a couple weeks ago with a client, DCO, where we talk a little bit about facial recognition. So if that's of interest, go check it out. Well, I've really enjoyed this. I think there's a lot here, and I know that there's different ways to go and unpack some of these topics and some of the technologies and solutions that you've been implementing over the last few months. It's really exciting, especially I guess as we consider what our lives will be like, what our workforce and our workplaces will be like as we come out of this crazy pandemic that we're all living through right now. One thing that I personally will be watching for is, has this accelerated the adoption of emerging technologies? I think AI is an interesting place right now from the perspective of emerging technologies, because there are so many different technologies within that category, but all of them are kind of struggling through what Gartner and other analysts call this gulf of I mean, I don't know if we've reached the trough of disappointment or whatever they call it, but there's certainly a lot of work to be done by folks like you, Vince, in piecing together the different technologies that are out there, working with people like us at Synaptiq to come up with workable solutions. But what is becoming increasingly obvious is that it is possible to do really incredible things with these technologies if you have the capacity to start thinking about solving business challenges in that way. So I think it's wonderful to see what you've been doing. And I would love to revisit this topic maybe in 6 months and see where you are with it and how things have evolved. Because I know that it's just that's the nature of machine learning, right? And what you're doing is that it will evolve, it will change, it will get smarter, it will grow, it will enable new things for your business, and it'll be really exciting to see what happens.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you to our audience for your time and attention and good questions. If you have any additional questions, feel free to email us. Got different ways of getting in touch. There's a website where you can fill out a form and get in touch with one of us at Synaptiq. I'm sure you can find Vince on LinkedIn. And there's some documents too that I encourage you to download and review and share if you find them of interest. So thanks again, and thanks, Vince.
Thank you, Portia. Bye.
Bye.